What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to Not Your Average Meta, an MTG Commander channel dedicated to bringing you decks and commanders you wouldn't normally find in your average meta. This week's video is brought to you by our new channel sponsor, International MTG. If you're looking for competitive pricing on your favorite MTG cards old and new, be sure to check out the International MTG store and TCG Player, link in the description of this video. This week on Not Your Average Meta, we have our much anticipated Commander Legends Boulder's Gate Precon Showdown featuring all your favorite Commander players. First of this week, we have Jacob playing the new Draconic Descent deck being led by Firkraag, Cunning Instigator. This Izzet deck looks to take advantage of Jacob's favorite mechanic, goading, in order to force his opponents into attacking each other for his own benefit. Then we have Gavin playing Party Time being led by Nalia arnise. This Orzhov deck looks to take advantage of banding together a complete adventuring party in order to triumph over his opponents. Next we have Justin playing Mind Flayers being led by Captain Nagathrod. This Dimir deck is looking to do Justin things and mill his opponents out for a Justin-esque type win. Finally, we have Firkraag playing the Exit from Exile deck being led by the pairing of Durnan of the Yawning Portal and the new background Passionate Archaeologist. This deck looks to use his commander's ability to exile and cast discounted creature spells while also triggering his background to deal massive non-combat damage to his opponents. Now that our fighters, let's step into the Thunderdome and see which deck will come out on top. Turn 1, Gavin plays his Swamp, then pays 1 for a turn 1 Soul Ring. Justin draws and plays an untapped Choked Estuary, revealing his Swamp from his hand. Fog draws for turn and plays a Mountain before casting his own turn 1 Soul Ring. Jacob draws for turn and plays a Mountain and also casts a turn 1 Soul Ring. Gavin draws and plays a Planch for turn before tapping out to cast his commander, Nalia, on turn 2. Justin draws for turn and plays a Swamp. He then pays 2 and casts a Mindcrank. Fog draws for turn and plays a Forest before also tapping out to cast his commander on turn 2, Durnan. Jacob draws for turn and plays an Island. He then pays 4 for Loot Dispute and creates a treasure token while taking the initiative. He then ventures into the first part of his dungeon, going to find a land for his hand. Gavin draws for turn and plays another Swamp. He then pays 2 for Zulaport Cutthroat and goes to combat, swinging his commander Jacob for 3 damage. He then takes the initiative and Jacob mills 3 cards while Gavin ventures into the dungeon, going to find a land for his hand. Justin draws for turn and then plays an Island before paying 3 to cast a Phyrexian Rager, losing a life and drawing a card. Fog draws for turn and plays another Mountain before taps out to cast Urabrask the Hidden. He then swings his commander Gavin for 4 damage and looks at the top 4 cards of his library, exiling a creature under his commander. He then takes the initiative and Gavin mills 4 cards while he ventures into his dungeon, going to find a land for his hand. Jacob draws and plays an Island before tapping out to cast Baloth Baratol, who comes into play tapped. Gavin looks at the top card of his library and then draws for turn before playing a tapped Temple of Silence. He then scries the top card to the bottom of his library. He then pays 4 to cast a Seasoned Dungeoneer, gaining the initiative and moving to the second part of the dungeon. Gavin then chooses to put 2+1/+1 counters on his commander and goes to combat, swinging his Cutthroat at Justin. Justin then blocks, killing the Cutthroat, which has Gavin getting a life while his opponents each lose 1 life, and Jacob creates a treasure token. Justin draws and plays a Drowned Temple for turn. He then pays 4 for a Leyline of Anticipation and passes. Fog draws for turn and then plays another Forest. He then pays 5 to cast Stolen Strategy before heading to combat. Fog then swings his commander Jacob for 3 commander damage. He then looks at the top 4 cards of his library and exiles a creature under his commander. After combat, Fog pays the reduced cost to cast an Ember Shieldbreaker from exile. Jacob draws for turn and then taps out to cast his commander Firkraag, Cunning Instigator, and then pays another 3 to cast a Burnished Heart. On his upkeep, Gavin moves into the next part of his dungeon, choosing to goad Fog's Urabrask. He then draws for turn before paying 2 to cast a Deep Gnome Terramancer. Gavin then pays another 4 for a Grim Hireling before going to combat. He then uses his Dungeoneer trigger on his commander before swinging her Jacob for 5 more commander damage. Jacob then has to mill 5 cards and Gavin passes. Justin draws for turn and plays a tapped Creeping Tar Pit before also passing. On his upkeep, each opponent gives Fog the top card of the libraries and Fog then draws for turn. Fog then plays a Forest for turn before paying 2 to cast his background, Passionate Archaeologist. He then pays 5 for Volcanic Torrent, which has him cascading into a Cultivate. Fog then casts Cultivate from exile, which has him dealing 3 damage to Jacob, while he goes to look for his 2 lands from his library. Volcanic Torrent then resolves and deals 3 damage to each of his opponent's creatures and planeswalkers. Gavin then remembers to go get a planes off his Terramancer trigger. Fog then goes to combat and swings his commander Justin for 3 damage and his goaded Urabrask at Jacob for 4. He then looks at the top 4 cards of his library and exiles a creature under his commander. After deciding not to block, Jacob takes his 4 damage and mills 4 cards. On his instep, Justin pays 4 to flash into Aboleth Spawn. Jacob draws for turn and then pays 6 to cast a tap, steal Hellkite, and passes. On his upkeep, Gavin goes into the next level of his dungeon, choosing to draw a card. He then draws for turn and plays a land before paying 3 for Rumor Gatherer. Gavin then looks at his top card before paying 3 to cast a Frontline Medic off the top of his library, and then an additional 3 for a Nighthawk Scavenger. He then goes to combat using his Dungeoneer trigger on his commander before swinging Hurt Fog for 6 commander damage. Fog then mills 6 cards, and Gavin remembers to put +1/+1 counters to each of his creatures because of his commander's party ability. Justin draws for turn and then plays an island. He then pays 5 to cast his commander Davy Jones, who comes into play tapped. On his upkeep, each opponent gives Fog the top card of their libraries, and Fog then draws for turn. Fog then plays Castle Emberth as his land for turn before paying 3 to cast a Tali Primal Storm from exile, dealing 6 damage to Jacob, which has him milling 6 cards. Fog then casts Curse of Abrosity targeting Gavin, which deals 3 damage to him, and in response he looks at the top card of his library. Fog then casts Managorger Hydra from exile, which deals 3 damage to Justin. Gavin then remembers to mill his 3 cards from taking the 3 damage from the Curse of Abrosity. Fog then goes to combat, swinging his commander Justin and Natalia Gavin. Each player then exiles the top card of their library while he looks at the top 4 cards of his library and exiles a creature under his commander. Fog then casts Malakar Blood Priest from exile, dealing 2 damage to Gavin, while each opponent also loses 2 life and he gains 2 life. He then casts Wharf Infiltrator from exile, dealing 2 damage to Justin, a Tenkali Hunter from exile, dealing 7 damage to Gavin, and then a Dracusath from exile, dealing another 7 damage to Justin. Regular combat damage then resolves before Fog uses the Tenkali trigger to free cast a Battle Mammoth from exile, which deals an additional 5 damage to Justin. Jacob draws for turn and then taps out to cast his commander Firkraag a second time. Gavin draws and plays a Castle Lockdown for turn. He then pays 5 to cast Puppeteer Click, choosing to reanimate Jacob's Avatar of Slaughter. He goes to combat and puts a +1/+1 counter on each of his creatures thanks to his commander, and also targets his Nighthawk with the Dungeoneer trigger. Gavin then swings his unblockable Nighthawk at his commander at Fog, while he swings his Frontline Medic at Justin. He then realizes all of his creatures will be indestructible this turn and decides to swing his Gatherer and Dungeoneer at Fog as well. Fog then declares blocks on Gavin's 3 blockable creatures, while Jacob puts 2 +1/+1 counters on his commander and draws 2 cards off Gavin's creature, dealing damage to Justin. Gavin then gains 18 life because of his double strike Nighthawk Scavenger, while Fog takes his 18 damage and mills 18 cards. Jacob then gets to put 2 more +1/+1 counters on his commander and draw 2 more cards from the Nighthawk, dealing damage, while Gavin gets the initiative. Gavin then casts a Gale Powder Mage and ventures into the bottom half of his dungeon. He then reveals the top 10 cards of his library and chooses to put a Butcher of Malakir into play for free with 3 additional +1/+1 counters on him. Justin draws for turn and then pays 3 to cast Fractured Sanity, having each of his opponents mill 14 cards. He then triggers his commander on his instep and chooses to put Jacob's Magus of the Balance into play under his control. On his upkeep, each opponent gives Fog the top card of their libraries, and Fog then draws for turn. Fog then plays another Force for turn and then casts an Endrace Forerunners, which pumps up all of his creatures +2/+2 while giving them Vigilance and Trample. Fog then goes to combat and calculates how much damage he needs to send at each of his opponents, before everybody reveals the top cards of the library from the Atali trigger. Fog then casts Ryusi from exile, dealing 6 damage to Jacob, Talisman of Hierarchy from exile, dealing 2 damage to Justin, and a Wild Mage Sorcerer from exile, dealing 4 more damage to Jacob. After this, regular damage then resolves, dealing enough damage to give Fog the win.
So I'm dead?
Yeah.
33?
Dude, it's a lot of damage.
Alright, so we have Firkraag with another win. How does it feel to win again?
Feels pretty good to pick up another win, you know. Haters are going to say it's fake. But at this point, it's about the same as walking or breathing. It just comes naturally, you know. But we'll see you next time for another great win. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you can see more games and decks you wouldn't normally see in your average meta.